We need to talk about Dillon the Villain Brooks. The NBA has always been better when there are heels. Now, some heels are specific to a city. Just ask Sacramento Kings fans how they feel about Big Shot Bob, aka Robert Horry. Some legendary NBA villains are heels toward every single team, including their own. Just ask Warriors fans and Jordan Poole about his teammate Draymond Green. There are rules to being an NBA villain, and it's not just about being hateable. And if it were, I would consider my former Oregon Duck Dillon Brooks a legitimate league outlaw, but in order to be considered a league-wide heel, you have to be somebody who puts butts in the seats for the sole purpose of being your hater. Say what you want about Patrick Beverley, but there are about 5 cities in America where a season ticket holder is going to make sure that they hold on to their Chicago Bulls tickets just so they can be in attendance to shout at him Russell Westbrook's now famous line, "Pat Bev tricked y'all." That line gets repeated all the time about the despised defensive specialist. Nobody is going to a Grizzlies game to see Dillon Brooks besides his family. And if you want to be a legitimate NBA villain, you have to be good at something. Literally anything. It could be rebounding like Dennis Rodman or three-point specialists like Reggie Miller. But what specifically is Dillon Brooks good at? He can't shoot. Sometimes he scores in bunches, but it's never efficient. He had the 8th worst field goal percentage in the NBA this entire year. And when you look at his effective field goal percentage, it'll make your eyes bleed. He jacks up the 2nd most three-pointers on the Grizzlies team this year, but he's 10th on this year's team in three-point percentage. Why does he keep shooting so many? I've heard people call him a defensive specialist, but statistically, he's not even top 5 in blocks or steals on the Grizzlies team. But maybe you're into the advanced defensive statistics, like defensive plus minus or victory over replacement. Those stats actually say the Grizzlies are better when Dillon Brooks is not even on the floor. So not only is nobody paying to see Dillon Brooks, he's not particularly special at anything either. Maybe he can justify his villain status by a third criteria. Can he hold your attention? We know through social media and reality television that anybody can be ridiculous enough to make you look. And Dillon Brooks can do that by coming to the stadium dressed as Stone Cold Steve Austin, or pushing a cameraman down for no reason, or by popping another player in the nuts this season. But a real villain is somebody whose mere presence on the court is a distraction. Bruce Bowen hardly ever said a word, but when he was with the Spurs, you had to keep an eye on him at all times. Watching Ron Artest getting ready to check into the game at the scorer's table was enough to make the hair on your arm stand up. But Dillon Brooks, he'll goose you, but he's not giving anybody goosebumps, and he damn sure ain't keeping nobody up at night. Man's just cringeworthy. It's like if the Scott's Tots episode of The Office made an NBA roster. You might be listening to this and be like, yo, gee, what up with the Oregon on Oregon hate? First of all, I don't hate Dillon Brooks. That's actually the point of this rant, that Dillon Brooks isn't even good enough to keep people to hate him. And second, Dillon Brooks was the 2017 Pac-12 Player of the Year. I wanted big things for Dillon Brooks. And he has one of the greatest flops in college or pro basketball history. But he can't even shoot, even though he never stopped shooting. He doesn't rebound, not a good passer, and the stats say, even advanced statistics, that he's just a middle-of-the-road defender. And he keeps aggressively touching men where no man needs to be touched aggressively on a basketball court. And none of that is good or fun or even compelling. And now all eyes are on Dillon Brooks because he decided he wanted to measure his worth against the king, LeBron James, saying publicly that he doesn't respect LeBron because he's old and he's never dropped 40 on him. Well, Dillon Brooks, you've never dropped 40 on anybody. And maybe that's why he doesn't respect himself enough to play the game the right way, and instead has decided to be this cosplay NBA villain. You're not the bad guy, bro. You're just bad. Let that sink in.